This time, the appetizer is prepared at Magnolia's restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina. Chef Donald Barickman puts together a simple oyster stew with fresh chives. For the entree, Chef Frank Stitt in Birmingham offers a good example of his inventive style with tuna and an upscale version of the low-country rice dish, Pirlau. For the dessert, French chef Pascal Demory demonstrates proper folding technique with a multifaceted creation encased in ladyfingers. It's a Pear Charlotte. Donald Barickman, executive chef at Magnolia's in historic district Charleston, was born in Charleston, West Virginia. He says, "I've lived in Charleston all my life, but I've only been here 11 years. Of course, for Charlestonians living anywhere else, it is a contretemps. The first course is oyster stew. Fresh oysters are shucked."
It's really important when you're shucking the oysters to try to keep your knife close to the shell so you don't slice right through the oyster. You just want to melt the butter. You don't want to brown it. You don't want the milk solids to caramelize. Adds a good rich flavor to the oyster stew itself. We use a tablespoon of minced celery, tablespoon of minced onion, and about half a teaspoon of fresh chives that are cut fine. Just sweat those again in the pan, just until the vegetables are translucent. Again, medium heat. You don't want to have any coloration from the butter or caramelizing the vegetables. And we're going to add our oysters drained of their liquid. About a quarter teaspoon, couple drops of Worcestershire. A pinch of fresh cracked pepper. And a cup of half and half. Now you just want to bring this up slowly to temperature. You really don't want to boil because the proteins from the oysters, as the juice seeps out of the oysters, I find that if you bring it to a boil, those proteins cook and coagulate, and it kind of makes for a grainy stew. And I find that if you just heat it just below the boil, you'll have a very silky, smooth oyster stew. Just a touch of salt to season. Just till the oysters are lightly curled. You can garnish with a little more fresh, just a touch of fresh chives on top. And up. There we have Magnolia's oyster stew.
Frank Stitt's two Birmingham restaurants, Highlands Bar Grill and Bottega, are hot tickets. Chef Stitt is personable, smart, and adroit at fusing classical technique and principles with Southern cookery. Consider his entree, grilled tuna with crawfish pirlau using basmati rice.
The first dish we're going to do today is it's a pirlau. A pirlau is a rice dish that is originally from the low country of Carolinas, and it could be made with anything. In this case, we're going to use some of my favorite ingredients. We're going to use some crawfish, and we're going to cook that with the rice and make a little stew of that. And then we're going to sear some tuna and serve the tuna on top of this crawfish rice, this pirlau, with a little bit of a watercress essence. Some beautiful watercress. Watercress is available all year long, but it's especially nice right now in the spring. Something that I used to gather some out in the clear springs out in the country. So what I have is some salted water. It's at a hard boil.
Blanch for about 30 seconds.
Then we're going to immerse it in ice water. So we call this blanching and shocking. We do this with most of our vegetables. And this sets the color, stops it from overcooking.
It is drained by both hand squeezing and also in a towel.
And then I'm going to get a little bit more of the water out of there. Put it in a kitchen towel. And we can just squeeze it dry. And then we're going to puree this. And this can be done either in a food processor, a robo-coupe, or a blender. We're going to use a little combination of chicken stock. Keeps it fairly light and healthy. And a little extra virgin olive oil.
The mixture is strained and held until service.
We can reserve this for when we're ready to go.
Chopped scallion, celery, carrot, and onion are softened in olive oil for the rice pirlau.
We're going to add 2 or 3 bay leaves, a little pinch of chili pepper.
Chopped garlic and some other ingredients are added before the basmati rice goes in.
I'm going to season that with a little salt right now. I'm also going to throw in just a couple of crawfish, a few crawfish tails, a little sprig of celery. Coat this with a little bit of the oil that's in the pan and just get everything stirred around and the flavors kind of coming together.
Chicken stock is added, the heat is lowered. Cover the pan and cook for 18 minutes until the liquid is absorbed.
So we've got this going at a nice little simmer. We're going to add a sprig of thyme, maybe a little fresh chopped thyme. And then cover.
Sushi-grade tuna is seasoned with salt and pepper before searing. Olive oil is in the cast iron pan.
So you want the pan to be very, very hot to begin with. We're going to get a good sear, a good crust, but we're going to leave the inside very rare. I'm going to turn the heat, just adjust it down a little bit. It's going to take about 2-3 minutes on the side, depending on the thickness. Now, I would say this is about 1.5 inches or so. You want it at least that thick so that you can cook it rare on the inside.
The cooked tuna will rest on a wire rack.
Now, one little trick that we do that I think is very important is that whenever we grill or sear almost any meats, we let it rest on a cooling rack, a cake rack. And what happens is that this allows plenty of air to move around, and since there's very little contact with the meat, there very little of the juices come out. And so this way all of the juices stay in.
Finely cooked crawfish are combined with chopped shallot, garlic, and green onion. This mixture will be added to the rice.
Now then, you don't have to do this, but we're going to just work in just a little bit of butter. Salt, a little bit more cayenne, oh yeah. And now for a little bit of our watercress essence. And perhaps, just to remind you of what we've got, is a little watercress and a crawfish. And that is our seared tuna with a crawfish pirlau with a watercress essence.
At the time of taping, executive pastry chef Pascal Demory was at the Hotel Sofitel in Minneapolis. He was born in northern France and got early training in Belgium. Watching him work amounts to a master class in pastry technique, to wit, this beautiful creation, a Pear Charlotte. The ladyfinger batter contains sweetened egg whites as well as egg yolks, which also contain sugar. There are 3.5 ounces of sugar total, 1/4 of which go into the egg whites and 3/4 go into the yolks. The yolks are whisked until pale yellow.
Now I whip my yolk.
Three 3.5 ounces of sifted flour will be added to the batter.
I put the flour on the eggs. And I flop very slowly.
This is not mixed completely until the egg whites are added.
Egg white, and you mix. You flop very slowly. When you mix your egg white, never too much, very, very slow. And if your mix there are a little bit egg white, you can keep no problem.
The ladyfingers are piped onto a parchment-lined sheet pan. Powdered sugar is sifted onto the ladyfingers. They will rest 10 minutes, then be coated again. Meanwhile, discs are piped and will become the bottom and middle layer of the charlotte. Note that the chef is free-handing these discs. The charlotte will be assembled in a ring mold. After baking, the chef will simply trim the dark edges and they will fit perfectly into the mold. Bake at 350 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes or until very light brown. The ladyfingers get another sprinkle of powdered sugar.
You can bake with one time, but it's very better if you put 2 times of sugar in top.
These also bake for 10 to 15 minutes in a 350 degree oven. The base for a mousse-like filling is pureed pear. Also gelatin leaves, which are softened in cold water. Dry, unflavored gelatin can substitute. Some of the pear puree is mixed with sugar in a small saucepan. It will go over heat and will be used to melt the gelatin leaves. The chef tests the temperature before adding the gelatin leaves.
Now the gelatin are enough. I squeeze. And you put on your pan with your mix. On your leftover confit.
The gelatin mixture is then poured into the rest of the puree.
And you stir a little bit.
After the baked ladyfingers are cooled, the chef trims them and cuts them in half. He's using this one as a guide. They go into the ring mold, top side facing out. Now the bottom, which was formed freehand, is trimmed freehand. Note the fit.
And you put your ring and you put inside.
The pastry is soaked with a combination of simple syrup and pear brandy.
You take one brush and you moisten the bottom, not the baby finger, because the baby finger is always very moist. And if you make the good baby finger, you don't need.
Then the pear mixture, which was flavored with pear brandy, is combined with whipped cream.
Slowly.
Some of the whipped cream had already been whisked into the pear mixture.
Now I take the pear mixture, I put very flat. I take my resins, is the resin I make yesterday, and you put a little bit.
The raisins were also flavored with the pear brandy. The second disc is added, the procedure repeated, and sliced glazed pears go on top.
You put on your knife and you push.